Hello, this is Shelby Law with the Great Basin Seasonal Outlook for February to May 2026. These pink dots are ongoing or planned prescribed fires. We do have quite a few of them out there, especially in Nevada, parts of western Utah, and up into western Idaho. Our year to date wildfires, so far we've had 11 wildfires for 4 acres, and our prescribed fire activity includes 45 prescribed fires with just under 3,000 acres total. We're currently seeing at PL1 both at the GAC and nationally. At some recent temperature and precipitation trends. Here we're looking at the month of January. Temperatures were above normal across the entire geographic area. For the most part, we did have a few areas there in far western Nevada and central Idaho where the temperatures were slightly below normal, but for the most part, above normal, not quite as warm as December was, but still warm, especially over parts of northern eastern Utah and up in eastern Idaho and even western Wyoming. Precipitation was much below normal for much of the area as well. Although we did see a few storms that brought some heavier rains for the most part, not a lot of snow, up into eastern Nevada, far northwest Utah, and into eastern Idaho as well. But otherwise, dry, pretty dry January. If we take a look a little bit further back, all the way back to October 1st, 2025 for the water year, our water year isn't looking too bad for some areas, Idaho into western Wyoming, and even just grazing northern Utah. Those areas seem to be closer to normal since October, and even this area in southwest Nevada, where we saw some really decent heavy precipitation rains late last fall and into early winter. And then a couple spots here in southeast Utah where they're right around or just above average for the time of year. But central Utah, notably very dry, and central parts of Nevada and up into southwest Idaho, also very dry, all the way back to the beginning of the water year. These precipitation trends are reflected in the drought monitor. We are seeing a lot of drought, especially over Utah in that moderate to severe category. And then here in red, we do see a couple of spots of extreme drought developing over central Utah this winter. Further north over Idaho, we have some drought in place as well, a little bit lower on the scale with that abnormally dry to moderate drought. And western Nevada is drought free at the moment. The seasonal outlook calls for the drought to continue over Utah and eastern Nevada, where we're seeing those conditions, but possibly some improvement um, across the north, Idaho into western Wyoming. Um, so we'll see if that ends up happening. The eddy or the flash drought, just showing kind of some short-term drought trends, highlights areas of southern Nevada and southern Utah for very dry in the last few weeks. Our snowpack at the end of January is not looking great for many areas across the Great Basin. The big winner is western Wyoming, where those values are actually pretty close to normal for the time of year. So if you want to ski, that's the place to go. Otherwise, the central Idaho mountains and the Sierra Front are coming um, in somewhere between that 50th or 60th to 80th percentile. Much of the snow is located at the highest elevations. Even in Idaho, the mid and lower elevations are generally snow-free right now. Um, that's also true of the low elevations in Nevada and, of course, Utah. The snowpack is pretty dismal across much of Utah, especially the central and southern portions of the state. All right, let's talk about some weather records so far this winter. This is a very notably warm and dry winter. So we've got some stats to talk about here. 2025, starting off, was the warmest year on record for Utah and Nevada. The 2025 to 2026 winter has been Idaho's warmest so far on record. Reno experienced the first freeze on record, occurring on November 19th. Reno also experienced the warmest December on record, and a few daily maximum temperature records were set in Utah in January. Looking at the snow, Salt Lake City has seen record low snowfall with only 0.1 inches of snow recorded so far this winter. Typically, we would have seen already over 28 inches by now. So very, very much below normal. The first measurable precipitation or first measurable snowfall didn't appear in Reno until January 8th, breaking the previous record. Record low snowpack is being observed in many areas across southern Idaho, and one example is the snow water equivalent at Bogus Basin was the lowest in 83 years on January 1st. So the warm, dry winter is really being felt across the entire Great Basin, with the exception of western Wyoming, where their snowpack does seem to be closer to normal. All right, let's talk about fuels, the impact of this winter on fuels. Just looking first at some ERCs across Nevada and southern Utah. Those values are right around maximums for the time of year. It has been warm and on the drier side, so no surprise there um, for the ERCs. There we go. And if we look at we've seen this image before. We showed it last year. This is the rangeland fire probability having to do with the amount of grass that's available out there. The areas shaded in the warmer colors indicate higher grass loading. Why this is important is because a lot of that's the grass that existed on the landscape last summer is still there. It was not compacted by the winter snows, and so it's going to be available to burn this spring. Okay, let's talk about the forecast here. We are currently experiencing a La Nina. The La Nina is weakening. We're going to go into some ENSO neutral conditions this spring and then head into an El Nino this summer. That's the current forecast. So if we look at that again, these blue shades are the La Nina that we've been experiencing this winter, although it didn't quite pan out as sometimes it does. It was fairly weak. Going into neutral conditions over the next few months, this spring and early summer. And then by summer, it looks like we're going to be heading into that weak El Nino territory. So a flip from the La Nina to the El Nino. Reminder again of what El Nino brings for us. Typically, this is the winter pattern. Winter El Nino gives us warmer, drier conditions across the Northwest, including Idaho and Wyoming, and possibly wetter conditions across the Southwest, maybe clipping parts of the Southern Great Basin. So this is the traditional winter pattern. It may not end up looking like this during the summertime. So we'll see. We're definitely going to start to get real curious about what this means for the monsoon, as that could be a really important part of our summertime weather pattern in the Great Basin. Forecast, the CPC outlook for February 6th through the 12th is calling for continued above normal, much above normal actually, temperatures across the western US and below normal precipitation over the Great Basin. For the February forecast, we're looking at maybe a chance of above normal precipitation and below normal temperatures over Idaho and into western Wyoming, but warm and dry expected further south and west. And then the seasonal outlook, which takes into account, or we're looking at here, March, April, and May, definitely brings in some warmer, drier pattern or continuation of the warm and dry for much of the Great Basin, especially Utah and Nevada. So not good news for our spring weather pattern. All right, let's put it all together here. And what do we get? Well, February through May, fire potential is usually quite light. Fire activity is low for the most part as we head into green up. And we do expect some spring storms to bring some precipitation. So we have normal activity expected. There are a few caveats to this, however, so just want to go through a few of those. The impacts of the spring forecast on wildland fire. So first of all, talking about wildfire, much of last year's abundant grass crop still exists across large portions of northern Nevada, southwest Idaho, as it has not been compacted by the heavy winter snow that we would typically get. In addition to that, warm, dry, and possibly windy periods are expected to occur more frequently this spring, given that warm, dry forecast, which could increase the potential for pre-green up fires in these grass-dominated landscapes. So this could be that year that we see more of those pre-green up grass fires popping up when it's windy. Implications for prescribed fire are shown below here. The lack of snowpack at low to mid elevations may impact or limit prescribed fire operations across Idaho and northern Utah. Snowpack is a little bit better in those areas, but again, the mid to low elevations are suffering quite a bit lighter snow. And then the lack of typical snowpack, even at the mid and higher elevations across much of the central and southern Great Basin, exacerbated by ongoing severe to extreme drought, may impact or limit prescribed fire operations this spring. So it's definitely something to think about as we plan our prescribed fire, looking at where that snowpack typically is and it is not this year, and how the drought impacts are playing out with that as well. So the overall forecast nationally for the next few months is shown here. February still looking for above normal potential over Texas into eastern New Mexico and parts of the southern plains and even Florida. That expands a little bit more in March. And then by April, some of that retreats back to just mainly Florida for April and May at this point. So again, Great Basin not really looking for any above normal fire activity. The fires that we do see, like those pre-green up fires, will generally be shorter duration and smaller. But as we get into May, May is when we'll really see the peak of green up happening. If green up does occur early this year or is weak due to the warm and dry conditions, we may start to see some of those larger fires popping up towards the second half or the end of May. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that as we head through the spring. That concludes the outlook for the month of February, and we'll update the forecast next month.